Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Bears in the Know series. I'm Brent Dunn, Executive Director of the Missouri State Foundation, and thank you for taking time to be with us this afternoon. This series is brought to you by our friends at Arvest Bank, and we appreciate them for sponsoring the series. And of course, normally, as we did this series before COVID, we had a lunch and we were sitting all together in the Turner Hospitality Room at the Meyer Alumni Center. And of course, since COVID, we've opted to go virtual. And you know, good things can happen out of bad things. And so by going virtually on this series, we've actually added and doubled our crowd. We've had people from different states involved and different regions of our state. So this is a good thing. That we can actually spread the news of what's going on at Missouri State to different publics. But thank you for being here. And as we get into the program, you see at the bottom of your screen the Q&A little icon. And so if you have questions for the speakers as we get into the program, please feel free to type in your question and we'll try to get to all the questions before we end our program at 1. But normally, as we do, we always start with an update from the university. And with us is our president of Missouri State, Cliff Smart. And so, Cliff, I'll ask you to take it away.
All right. Thanks, Brent. And thanks for joining us today at the Arvest Bank Bears in the Know. Thought I would talk on briefly on 4 topics connected to the university. And the first one is kind of where we are in the middle of the pandemic. And so as we navigate through the first half of the second semester this year, we're going in a really good direction, just like the state of Missouri and Greene County is. We have had less than 10 new cases on campus for 4 weeks in a row now. And that's tremendously positive. We've also been designated a vaccine distribution point, and we have been vaccinating people this week. We've given almost 3,000 shots since the vaccine rolled out. We expect to regularly have vaccine moving forward and anticipate moving to the next tier on Monday. And so that's school teachers and essential workers like our maintenance team, our IT staff, our child development workers. And so very excited as we will play a bigger and bigger role in helping people get vaccinated in Springfield. And just like the city is doing, we are working hand in glove with the city in figuring out the timeline and the metrics for unwinding the restrictions that we've placed ourselves under. And so room capacity limits, limits on events, distancing, masking, etc. And so we'll be working to get back close to normal by fall. I expect that for the rest of this semester, we'll continue to operate as we have. But I expect by summer and then certainly by the time we get to fall, that we will be back to having live events with most limitations removed. But we're going to do that in accordance with science and medical advice, and with the city of Springfield. And they have set up metrics to help them move that way. We had input into those and believe they are the appropriate metrics for all of us to track as we get back closer to normal. Second topic, the other big thing happening is the legislature is working on a budget. The good news is there's revenue has increased over a year ago. The governor proposed a budget that restores funding to the university from the prior year. We are now working to increase that. The House will also, or the legislature will also be on spring break next week, so they're at the halfway point as well. And when they come back, a budget substitute will be proposed, and we are working to have influence in what that looks like. The other piece of this is we've gotten additional money from the federal government that has come in. Today, we gave a partial refund to our students that had to take online classes in the fall of $29 a credit hour. And so we pushed out today $1.9 million in refunds to our students. And I think that that obviously has been well received. Third topic, we're playing all 17 sports at the university. And so if you're a sports fan, this is a good time. We have 3 more home football games to go, and baseball and volleyball, and all of our sports are competing right now. Volleyball's in first place in the league. Men's soccer's off to a great start, 2-0. They play Creighton in a non-conference game this afternoon in Kansas City. And then the women's tournament begins tomorrow. Unfortunately, fans are not allowed to attend, and so Gail and I will not be going to that. But we are planning to go to San Antonio, and on Monday night next week at the Q, we will host a watch party to see where the Lady Bears are going. No matter what happens this weekend, we're confident we're going to be playing in San Antonio in the NCAA tournament this year. And so we'd love to have you join us at the Q on Monday night for the watch party for the Lady Bears. And then finally, next week, our Board of Governors, we anticipate will approve we'll approve a major construction project with one following closely behind it. And that is the permanent tent theater pavilion. Bids came in yesterday very, very favorably. And so we'll be moving ahead with that project immediately. And for many of you who go to tent theater or other things in Craig Hall or Ellis Hall, you often park in those parking lots south of Grand, walk under the through the underpass and onto campus. So as a part of the renovation and the creation of this arts pavilion, we're going to be completely reconstructing that underpass under Grand to make it much more friendly for everyone, to have a gradual slant down, an elevator on this side of campus, stairs that actually meet accessibility codes. And so all of that work will be going on in the next week, in the next year. And so for summer of 22, both of those projects will be complete and tent theater will be back outside. We do expect to have tent theater this summer, but it will be in Craig Hall as we will be constructing this pavilion where the tent typically goes. Happy to answer questions on any topic about the university at the end of the Journagan Ranch presentation. And so let me now introduce the Dean of the Darr College of Agriculture. Ron Del Vecchio, please introduce the program for this afternoon.
Thank you, President Smart. We are pleased to have this opportunity to share with you the activities that are going to go on, or that are ongoing, I should say, at our Journagan Ranch facility. You know, I have 2 folks here, Marty Lewick and Clint Delbaum, who you know, they're boots on the ground. They're the people who are doing a lot of this work, along with some other folks that Marty will mention during the presentation. And I thought it best if you heard it straight from them, what's going on and their experiences and their accomplishments. So I'm just going to hand it over to Marty and to Clint and let them get started on this presentation. So Marty.
Thank you, Dr. D. Appreciate this time to share our story and our partnership with the Missouri Department of Conservation and what we've been doing in the past several years, and able to share it here with the public. And I'm Marty Luig. I've managed Journagan Ranch. I'm in my 40th year there. The Journagan family, Leo and Jean, Alan and Jill, gifted this ranch in 2010 to Missouri State University. And what a gift that has been, the resources it's been able to provide for the students and the things that we've been doing there. It's great. We are the largest Hereford herd owned by a university in the United States. We're the largest Hereford producer here in the state of Missouri. We are the longest running Hereford sale in the state of Missouri. We're getting ready to have our 30th sale here the first Saturday in October. I think quite a feat to be able to be around that long and be a part of that industry. I'd like to introduce my guys. I've got Eric Luig, and by our last name, we are related. That is my oldest son. He's been with the ranch for 13 years. He's in charge of calving cows. He cuts hay. I mean, we all interchange jobs, but he's a great mechanic, has lots of abilities, and he's a perfectionist. So his records are very detailed, and it's very nice to have that when we're submitting data. The next person is Chance Reese. He is a graduate here from College of Ag. He's been with us 3 years. He develops all our replacements, manages all our wean calves, takes care of some of the herd bulls, helps calve cows. A very important person, good young man, has learned a lot since he's been there. Love him. The next person is Eddie Massey. He was raised right there in our area. Very sharp young man, a great welder, a great mechanic. He does a lot of our bull development for these young bulls, getting them ready for sale. Manages all the calves, all the 2-year-olds. So that's a big job in itself, but another good young man that's really worked good for us. That's some pictures here we've got in here, pictures of operation, and that kind of give you an idea of what goes on. This is Russell Driscoll. He's been with us 35 years. All 3 of his girls were born and raised on the ranch. He's in charge of our commercial cow herd, so he calves them, manages them during the year. He helps, he's been the primary baler when it comes to hay production. Loves to hunt, fish, loves NASCAR, great kind fun to be a part of his life for 35 years. He's been a great help to us. Kind of share a story how this all got started. Dr. Elliott, when he was here, he kept saying, we need to do something with the Department of Conservation and what could we do? And, you know, we shared, and I think it was in 2013, we had several of the MDC people come down from Jeff City and make a tour of the ranch. And things just kind of got started there. There's been a little bit of a disconnect with cattlemen and the Conservation Department. I think we've made some changes to that. We've been able to implement some practices there that I think are advantageous. We'll be able to share that with you when we get into Clint's portion of the presentation here. But that was very instrumental in getting that group together and doing it. And that partnership has grown through the years. It's been great to work with them. And I'm always excited to be able to show it off when they come down. I know Clint was down here a few weeks ago and show them all the fencing projects and things that we've accomplished since he's been there last time. And that's a blast to do it. But it's all been beneficial to how our cattle are run there and keep that ranch profitable. And those are kind of the things that helps in our model to make everything gel and work together. I think I'm going to turn it over to Clint. He's going to talk about some of our practices here. And I can end it with a conversation there at the end to maybe condense it to what else we're doing.
The original focus of this project, this conservation project on Journagan Ranch, was to show that wildlife and conservation can coexist with agriculture production on a working cattle ranch. And Journagan Ranch's primary focus is livestock production. We did quite a bit of planning involved on this. We did a grassland plan and as well as a forestry management plan, originally to set up a set of goals. This is one of the instructors from here out on the site. He had a bunch of students out there doing soil mapping as part of one of our practices. We're getting ready to go. This is an example right here of some of the planning that we have done. We have done this type of drawings and sketches on what we're trying to do on big portions of the ranch, where we have added water and warm season grass and pollinator plots and that type of thing. We've established native warm season grass. Native warm season grass is kind of twofold. It's ideal for forage for livestock. It is also good for wildlife. So by incorporating native warm season grass into the grazing program here, we can kind of be a win-win. This was the original stand we planted. It was 35 acres. Pretty, as the local conservationist described, the property is pretty bony. It was a site that really didn't grow wasn't real productive, didn't grow a lot of grass to begin with. We put in native warm season grass, and Marty would tell you that the stuff gets up shoulder high in the summertime, and we get a tremendous amount of grazing off of this particular field. We grazed this field over the last 4 years in earnest. The year before that, it was by accident, but we have gotten quite a bit of use out of this. Here's some of our signage that we put up around the ranch. This shows our cooperation between Missouri State and Missouri Department of Conservation. Just picture some cattle there on the property. Livestock fencing. We've done quite a bit of fencing on the ranch, and the fencing would fall into two categories. One would be a livestock exclusion fencing from glades and woodlands and that type of thing. The other would be fencing paddocks, paddock fencing, splitting the pastures up where Marty can do a more efficient job of utilizing the forage that we produce. Here's an example of some of the fencing. We use high tensile electric fencing, and this particular fence is kind of hard to see, but it's a 3-wire high tensile electric fence. We've had real good luck with the electric fencing on the ranch. This item here, Marty was describing to me as a repurposed piece of natural gas line. We're able to drive in the ground, and it is its own insulator. So we have used that in strategic locations around the ranch. This is an area, when Marty described what he had done here on this site, he had a smile on his face. So I knew that it was working for him. This is something that would work for him. We've split up a large pasture into 4 different paddocks, and Marty put these gates in here to where we can move cattle, or he can move cattle from any of these paddocks directly to the main corral. He has an issue that needs to be treated or whatever he needs to do, he can get access out of here and take them directly to the main corral to work the cattle. And these practices, these conservation practices, have got to work for Marty. They've got to work for Marty and his team so that we're not doing things that are holding him up in any way. These are conservation practices we're putting on the landscape that are actually enhancing the cattle operation. Here's another picture of some of the paddock fencing that we've done. This right here, this pole in the center is actually the center of this field, a large field, Marty, acreage wise, 200 acres maybe?
Yeah, 200 acres.
200 acres, so it's split into quarters. And you can see there's wire spring gates that cut, so the cattle, they can move them into any paddock here from one to the other. Cattle like to move. They like to go to a new pasture. In this picture, I'd title this one, and here they come. Cattle do like to move onto fresh pastures, and so it makes the management actually easier. These are some of our solar fencing. One thing to keep in mind on the Journagan Ranch, that most of the areas are remote and have no access to electricity. So this is a solar panel that feeds a deep cycle battery that feeds a electric fence charger. And these chargers are very hot. This one has actually been in place and been in operation for 6 years. Marty was saying he just now replaced the battery for the first time. So they're very effective. They jump a blue spark about 3/8 of an inch. And believe me, if you back into one of these fences, you're not guessing whether you hit it or not, you know. But this is another panel. I believe Marty said this was a 100-watt panel on this one, but it's basically the same setup with a deep cycle battery down below. This is a weather station that's there on the ranch, where we can get accurate, up-to-date weather constantly. We're talking livestock exclusion fence. These areas where we fence the glades and woodlands so we can do the more intensive management work. They are set up where we can flash graze those as part of the management. Here it is. This is another fencer that we have. We've got, 4 or 5 of these setups around the ranch. Livestock water. And I've always described this, that anytime we can provide water on the uplands, that's an area that cattle don't have to water out of the stream. This, as you can tell by the color of the water, that it is spring fed. We've developed a spring. This is another water. It's down in a hayfield. The idea here is to be able to get the cattle out of the stream. There's a group of cattle that are on site. I feel like this is a bunch that I kind of know personally. I've been working around them. They have rotated around our practices since day one, I believe. Here is another livestock waterer that we have installed. This has, as you can see, it's split across the middle with fence. So we're actually watering out of 2 paddocks here at this point, but it is designed where we could water out of 4 paddocks. We've got it split into quarters so we could water out of 4 different paddocks from this one waterer. Here is a solar powered waterer. This is the panel up here. It catches sun. There's a 48 volt power storage here that runs a pump down in a pond that pumps water to a storage tank under the ground up here on top of the ridge. That gravity flows this tank down below. This tank holds about 1,200 gallons. The storage tank up on the hill is about 1,000 gallons. So we've got 5 days of water for the herd of cattle right there to graze. And this is our native warm season grass that we planted, and we can split that and make more efficient use of that grazing opportunity. This is the development of a spring. This was a wet area that Marty described as a good place to stick a tractor in the middle of the summer. We were able to lay like a French drain through that and feed a stock tank that stays full, 8 months out of the year. This is another spring development. We were laying this, it has these styrofoam peanuts wrapped around, and we're using that as a water gathering device. Feeds a tank like this right here. There is another livestock exclusion fence. You can barely see this pond below here catches the overflow from this spring-fed tank. that it provides wildlife water here. And believe me, that does get used. It gets used heavily by deer and turkeys. Our glade woodland work, these glades and woodlands, as mankind has stopped the wildfires that used to rage across the Ozarks. These glades and woodlands have become denser and denser until they actually get to a point that a lot of the undergrowth stops growing. And so we try to open those up. And part of our practice here is to run fire across these glade woodlands. You notice that, we do get them opened up. We do get grass into these areas. Here's a burn that Marty and I did this last spring on the native warm season grasses. The native warm season grasses are rejuvenated by fire. It's really amazing how they respond to fire. So the key here is to leave enough fuel on the ground after our fall grazing to where we can burn them in the spring. We try to burn them 3 out of 5 years. Here's some of our fire from last spring and burning off a glade. This glade has been fenced to exclude livestock. There are quail in here on this glade. This fire got pretty exciting right here a few moments after this picture was taken. But this is one of our glades. It's open. You can see the purple coneflower, pale purple coneflower. Here's some Missouri primrose. Here's a native milkweed in bloom. These plants, after a fire, they just came up. We'd never seen them before. After the fire, they responded and came up. And we go into these areas 2 years after a fire, you see more flowers in there then than there are now. This area needs to be burned the second or third time yet. Here is a glade woodland that we actually did a cedar sale on, and then had some sawyers come through here and actually open it up. We opened this up. Our next step is to run a burn, but you can see the native grasses that are growing up into this. If we could get a hot enough fire through here to remove a lot of this down slash, there would be a lot more grasses and wildflowers show up. The current condition that this is in is ideal nesting habitat for quail, turkeys, that type of thing, and they have flourished in this area after we have done this work. Bald eagle on the Journagan Ranch. Here's some glade work we're doing, dropping cedars. We go through there and drop these. We let them lay for about 2 years before we run a fire. That becomes a pretty volatile fuel after it starts to dry out. While they're laying there, they do create escape cover for bobwhite quail. I have flush coveys that will fly right into one of those treetops and run out the backside and flush and fly again. There's a butterfly milkweed on one of our pollinator plots that we planted. This was on a tour. I had the Missouri Department of Conservation folks on a tour. That is actually a monarch butterfly on that milkweed. That was not a staged picture. That actually happened. Here's some woodland sunflower and also some giant ragweed. These odd areas that are around the ranch are ideal loafing areas for bobwhite quail. There's a butterfly pollinating a common milkweed. Butterflies aren't the only pollinators. We've got honeybees and all kinds of bugs that use it. It just, the butterflies seem to be the ones that are in the news. The monarchs, anyway, that's not a monarch butterfly, but here's some coreopsis. Prickly pear cactus. We've got 3 different varieties of prickly pear cactus that grow on Journagan Ranch. You can see the soil in the background here. We're pretty close to bedrock right here on this site, but those There's a pretty big bed of those right here in this particular spot. Some oxeye daisy, daisy fleabane. This is a dolomite rock, stood about 3 feet tall. It's out on the glade there on an area that Marty calls Buzzard Bluff. There's a whole group of these. They're a dolomite limestone formation here as the water has dissolved them. I thought this one was interesting. There's some black-eyed Susan. There's another picture of some milkweed. Purple coneflower, the butterfly. Here's another one, butterfly pollinating a purple coneflower. Some morning glory. Okay, when we set this project up, we wanted to have some measurements of failure or success. One of those, the aquatic measure, is water quality monitoring. We have been doing this since the start of this project 6 years ago. This particular group of data here, these students are identifying aquatic insects. They have taken aquatic entomology and they're identifying these insects. Certain ones indicate clean water, certain ones indicate dirty water. This particular set, we have site 1 and site 2. We've got a score of 20 here and a score of 24 down here. So that tells us that the water is actually better quality after it's run 2 miles across the ranch than it is when it comes onto the ranch. Here's an example of some of that water. It's clear, clean. It's a group of students that are doing water quality sampling. This is site 2. It's right below a low water bridge, about center of the ranch, I would say. Here they are identifying insects. They're sitting right in the county road, but they got an ice cube tray there. They put the insects as they put them into those different trays and they count them to get an idea of how many of each there are, and then they determine water quality from that. The terrestrial measurement that we set up on this is Bob White quail study. We've been doing this for 6 years. We've got the data here. There's enough on this graph right here that we could probably talk the rest of the day. I'm not going to do that. I just say that we do have the data. The black line running across the middle of this is the population line. It shows that our population is growing. It has steadily increased. These variations in these other lines are due to management practices, weather, and these last two, I'm going to say, are due to a lack of prescribed fire, just because of the wet years we've had. Here's our study findings, and here again, we could spend the rest of the day talking about this, but one thing I would like to point out is that on a grass-based dairy cattle operation in the Ozarks, we have dramatically increased the quail population. On this particular case, we've increased quail numbers by 5 times across the entire property with management practices done on only 10% of the land base. So Marty said the ranch is 3,300 acres. We've done management on about 330 acres, and we have increased the quail population 5 times by addressing 10%. Okay, outreach is a big part of that, and Marty, you might want to step in on any of this. This is a big part of our project. This is a field trip. We're going around, going into our practices, but we're also going up and looking at the cattle herd and talking about cool season grazing management in this particular site.
I think too, also, Clint, when we talk about this outreach, this is showing other cattlemen and other people that we are working with the environment and trying to improve everything that we're touching here. And we're finding out as we get deeper and deeper into these practices that it does have this positive influence on wildlife, and wildlife and cattle operations go hand in hand. A lot of the things that you're doing for them also improve what we do for cattle. And I know it's something here we've involved a lot of our neighbors here. When we have field days, they'll come over. They are excited to come again because they want to see what else we've done. But that's also part of the outreach that we're going to be able to hopefully involve other ranches and farms around us to make that area even a bigger area that have more impact on our wildlife in that area.
And here's a group we have, and Marty and I are talking about the benefits of the native warm season grass. This is that original 35 acres that we planted 5 years ago. And we were talking to them about grazing data and what we had collected on how many animal unit days had actually been on this 35 acres. A group of Brazilians out looking at our project.
And I might share here, it was really unique when they came, because every time we crossed one of those crossings and they seen that clear water, they were out there taking pictures. And I finally asked, I said, why are you taking pictures? He says, we don't have anything like this at home. All their water is brown and it's, dirt-based stream banks and whatever. So it's kind of neat to have these kind of resources we take for granted. So I think it's our job to keep them that way, keep them pristine if we can. And working on a cattle operation, I know we get negative ads sometimes on how, cattle are detrimental. There's ways to make that all work.
It's another group of Brazilians. Here's a horseback group,
Right.
trail ride. They're going up onto the where we've done our practices up there. It's a group of Chinese.
I had a unique question from one of the Chinese students, and they said, farming ought to be easy. Your grass is free. And I clarified to them that there was an initial upfront cost when you purchased it. There's an initial cost of maintaining it. There's taxes to pay on it. And I said, so it really isn't free. But that, in his mind, that's what he perceived to see.
And it's another group of Brazilians. And I know it appears that we have a lot of people from other places here, but we have big groups of students that we take out constantly. In fact, the quail data that we've collected is done by students. They leave Springfield at 4 o'clock in the morning to get over to gather that quail data. And so then we have a field trip while we're there. It's a group of Chinese looking at the cattle down on that lower end. It's an eastern collared lizard. There's a lot of interesting animals that live on Journagan Ranch. It's eastern collared lizard. They're a desert Southwest species. We have a thriving population in 2 or 3 different places there on the ranch. They're a lizard. They can be 18 inches long or so. When you spook these, they jump up on their hind legs and run. They live on our glades, and I describe our glades on the ranch. They are an example of Missouri's desert type climate, little piece of the Southwest that we have here. We have tarantulas, scorpions, and all those type of things that live there with these, but they are a very unique animal that does live there on the glades. This is a hog-nosed snake, a puff adder. They're not real common. I saw this on the glade. He stood up, popped his neck out like a cobra. I poked him with a stick and he rolled over and played dead. So they're a pretty unique animal that we see there. Is pictured of a couple of 3-toed box turtles. We also have the ornate box turtles that live on the ranch as well. They're more of a prairie type species, but these in this particular area, I think there was about 8 turtles right here within about a 15-foot circle. It's a picture that Marty took. Started out the slideshow with the sunrise, and this is the moon up over the ranch. But does anybody have any questions?
Yes, we do have some questions, and probably the first one that someone brought in is tell us exactly where the ranch is located from the campus.
It's approximately 70 miles southeast. We're in the northeast corner of Douglas County. It's down there in the woolly buggers. I don't have very good reception with phone. I don't have very good internet speed. It's a beautiful place to have a cattle ranch.
And then also on that question, what is the percentage of the ranch that is pasture and what percentage is woodland?
There is about 400 acres of pasture on the ranch.
No, woodland.
Okay,
Yeah.
timber and woodland. The majority of the timberland that is on the ranch is woodland. It's a kind of an open timber. It's there are some north facing slopes, and then up on the north end there's some forest land. I'd say there's 2,800 acres of grass. There's probably the rest of it, 400 or 500 acres of it is either forest or woodland.
Glade, yeah.
Or glade.
And we do have the forestry, Mike Gorn with forestry group here at the university. They're doing a silvo project, which is maintaining trees, but they're thinned out enough where the grass grows so the canopy doesn't completely cover it. And so you'd be able to graze in the shade. So, other portions of the Ag College are participating in some research projects down there and some other things that they're doing. So it's just not cattle. There's other things going on in relationship to this College of Ag.
Another question came in, and you talked a little bit about the water quality sampling, but what are the names of the streams which Journagan Ranch drains into?
The majority of the ranch is in what we call the Clifty Creek water basin. Clifty Creek heads about 2 miles above the ranch and runs through it entirely. And then we have what we call the Red Bank, which there on the very southeast corner intersects into the Clifty, and then will eventually end up in the North Fork.
North Fork of the White River.
Yeah, White River.
And then you did talk about the sampling, and has there been water quality sampling for nutrients in the receiving streams?
We have done most of the work on Clifty Creek itself, and with the understanding that we start at one end of the ranch and work downstream. We have 3 different collection sites, and there are the receiving streams that do run in to, so that can cause some variance on what we're doing. The other thing that we run into problems with our water sampling is that Clifty Creek, like a lot of Ozark streams, is a losing stream. So there are areas that it doesn't flow year round. And 2 of our collection sites are in areas that usually have water. One of them, it can go dry. The water goes underground. So they're probably, sometimes we just cannot collect in certain sites.
A question came in, are the students members of a stream team?
Yes, they are. There is a stream team that was established there on Journagan Ranch. And as you saw in some of those pictures, we do have good student cooperation on that, and they really enjoyed it. And from year to year, as students graduate and go, you have to kind of recruit new students in and to take up where the last group let off.
Do students live there, or how do they get to the ranch?
We would love for them to live there. We just don't have facilities to do so. So they're at the Missouri State Fruit Station. We do have some ability to house students there. Maybe not the most ideal because of the distance between the ranch and there is about 16, 17 miles. But there is ability to do that. Otherwise, you can't stay overnight and enjoy some of those things. But we have had students there that have stayed a month and they lived in those facilities just fine. Usually college students are a little more resourceful than probably us as adults, but they can live in a different system than what we can, a whole lot easier.
So you don't house them in your place, Marty? You don't have all?
No, I wish we could. We just haven't done that. So.
Yeah. Another question came in about the water containers, those tire water containers. Do you guys build those, or are those commercially put together?
So the tires are a lot of times used tires. And so I don't know if what most people know what is a uke, but if you go into these big quarries, there's these great big huge dump trucks and these tires that come off of them. A lot of these are used or ones that have defects in them, and they cut them horizontally in half. And so that becomes a wire. You got to use concrete or some sort of form to seal it off at the bottom when you bring the piping through. But it's just a repurposed material that we can use for our advantage.
And they work very well. We can come up through the center with the plumbing and then pour the concrete in there, and they work very well. They hold a large volume of water. And I think that one big one that was in that hayfield that we shown earlier here, I believe it holds about 1,200 gallons. So when you think about how much water a cow drinks a day, 10, 12 gallons a day, there's enough water for a number of cattle to drink with just the water in that tank.
Another question came in, and if you can share rough estimates, what is the cost now of fencing, the solar fencing and the solar watering systems?
Well, the high tensile fencing is probably one of the most economical fencing things that you can use because it doesn't take a lot to build. We have little tensioners or tighteners on that, so you can put it up pretty loose, tighten it up. If a tree falls on it, it just goes to the ground. You cut the tree off, you can retighten that wire. You can't do that with barbed wire. And barbed wire, time you buy a roll of barbed wire, $72. T-post is upper $3s to $4 a piece. They're going to be 10, 12 foot apart. Corner posts are $27, $28 a piece. Bracing, we use continuous panels, but that's going to be roughly $40 for the bracing. So you can add up a lot of dollars. Using barbed wire. High tensile is by far the most economical way to do it. And as long as you keep them energized, they won't bother it. And the deer will jump over it, through it.
When trees fall on it, you can go down there with a chainsaw, cut the tree off of it, and the wire jumps right back up again. They're pretty easy to maintain.
And we have remotes so we can touch the wire and hit a button, and we can shut that fencer off. It might be a mile or a mile and a half away. Shut it off, make your repairs, and then turn it right back on. And so you're not driving all the way to the charger to turn it on or turn it off. And so it's pretty cool.
Do you heat the water tanks in the winter?
No, and that's kind of the neat thing about those tires. They're black. And so when it's sunny, it's going to melt what ice might be on it right around the edges. That's where the cattle drink. Or we have little copper tubing in there with little valves that we can turn on and cause that water to circulate and allows that to stay open during the winter months.
It is spring water, so it is fairly warm coming in there. So, if we've got water trickling into those tanks, they will stay open.
A question came in about how do you protect the soil where the livestock move from paddock to paddock?
Well, and probably the most damage is done by a truck when it's wet. Cattle, they'll tromp it a little bit, but when we have other gates, like we showed that one picture and there was 4 gates in the center, we don't always move the cattle that way. We have other gates up on what we call a road through the pasture. And I can tell you, once those cattle get used to being rotational grazed, when you drive in there, they'll be standing at the gate before you even get there. And you drop the handles, move them out of the way, and they go in and their heads instantly go down. But in a 3 paddock or 4 paddock rotational, they've got 3, say you rotate once a week, they've got 3 weeks of rest. And so the clovers and other things regenerate with photosynthesis and allows better grazing for the cattle to have more to graze, be able to store more on the stump instead of have to bale it. So there's a lot of things that this can do to help the bottom line of these cattle ranches.
And do you have any areas where the cattle access the stream for watering?
Primarily it's the winter time where we will calve on our hay fields. But the amazing thing is they don't go stand in it. They go get their drink, either cross it or whatever. Most of the places in the streams, we don't have cattle on in the summertime when it would get hot. And part of the thing that we get into, and this gets into cattle breeding, but we've tried to breed our cattle where they'll shed their hair. Fescue toxicity doesn't bother them. So, I mean, this is a genetic thing that we have bred in these cattle for going on 30 some years now. And so you're not going to see those pond standers and nothing but their head sticking out. We've tried to alleviate that, and there's things we can control and things we can't control. And that's one thing we can select for in our breeding practices is cattle and how do they handle our grasses.
So then going to the streams for watering, then you don't have any issues managing the
No,
soil?
and if we did have something like that, they've got ways to fence that off to where they just have one access point. And it's usually just enough that they can get their water, not stand in it. And I've seen those. We just don't have a place like that. Most of the time when we're on our summer pasture, most of those streams are dry. And so you have to rely on pond water as your source of water, or the alternative waters we provided with the tires and things where we've sourced some of the springs that we have available to us.
Well, the Journagan Ranch is obviously a beautiful place, but Marty, do you were there when the announcement was made on campus that the Journagans would donate this to Missouri State. Is this what you envisioned several years later in terms of the education, in terms of the partnerships? What are your feelings on that?
I'm going to share Leo's thoughts and the reason he did this. You know, this is something, it was his true love. That was his passion. Yeah, he was in construction or whatever, but this is what he loved. And anybody has passion for something, they like to preserve it. And so in his case, when he was thinking about what's going to happen to this ranch, he didn't want it split up or sent, you know, all the way out of here and whatever. He wanted to preserve it. And then he didn't think of anything better that we could do is to donate it to Missouri State University. And he's he's a far thinking man. And it was amazing to me that he was in his thought process, but he says, we're going to start getting students into agriculture that aren't raised in agriculture. And somewhere they have to have a way of experiencing this to continue their education. And that was his reason. And I mean, that really blew me away. That's pretty awesome to donate a ranch of that size to an institution, and then the institution to be able to care for it and take care of it. It's cool.
The question came in, dairy cattle, they're not located on the ranch? Or?
No, that's a big no.
Okay.
I don't want to milk cows.
There you go. Well, the Journagan Ranch certainly has been a great benefit to Missouri State, and not just to agriculture, the college, the Darr College of Agriculture, but the conservation and all the research you all are doing. So gentlemen, great job in your presentation. Great work that's going on at Journagan Ranch. And so we thank you for this great presentation. Appreciate you sharing.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for taking your lunch hour to visit with us with Cliff's update of the university, things that are going on here, and certainly hope you find things that you didn't know about Missouri State and spread the word. So our next Bears in the Know comes up May the 5th, and we're talking at a totally different subject. This is about college students' mental health trends. Of course, that is getting national news all over the country, and something that is very timely. So I hope you join us on May the 5th at noon Central Time for that presentation. We'd like to thank again the Darr College of Agriculture for their presentation, and thank Arvest Bank for helping us present this series. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon. Go Bears.